Tartaria was everywhere, and the history is fabricated, completely fabricated, all of it. We used to think, well, the Middle Ages, we really don't know what happened. We realized that they invented the Dark Ages, and they put it there to push a lot of things into the past. And we realized, some parts of history could be wrong. But no, not everything is fabricated. Everything is fabricated. One interesting thing is the architecture that we find all over the world, in all our cities, that ancient Gothic-style architecture, incredibly intricate design, and people look at it and say, oh, but that's just how they did things in the old days. Several of those buildings are simply stunning. The architecture of those buildings is absolutely enchanting. And think about it, if we lived in a feudal culture, if we lived in a culture where you had to go out and work to make a living and earn a wage in order to pay to stay alive, you never would have had the time or the inclination to build buildings that look like that and function the way they did.
Said it before and I'll say it again. I think that we stumbled upon a lot of things that were already here before we were. Not so much like modern day buildings and things like that in cities, but like the pyramids and whatnot. Like, I do think there were a lot of things here before we got here. I do think we took a lot of inspiration from these previous civilizations that were here before us, previous technology, secrets, knowledge, things that we've found over the years. But this Tartaria stuff, man, it's super interesting. I love it. It's kind of wild and creepy at the same time. Being from Chicago, watching a lot of this stuff really made me rethink the Chicago fire, as if like maybe they burnt down the city of Chicago to hide a lot of the old architecture and secrets and basically evidence of a more intelligent civilization, and then just rebuilt a new city on top of it. It just kind of makes you look at all these other similar things that happen across the world, just tearing down old stuff and building new stuff on top of it. Not necessarily just to progress, the city and update buildings, stuff like that, but for like a more nefarious reason. And if this is your first time here, make sure you give the video a like and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this. We do them all the time.
April 6, 1989. And that's when Gene and me and Bob's wife and his wife's sister, we drove in. We had in the back Geiger counters, film, cameras, videos, everything. And as we drove down Groom Lake Road at that time, we thought that the legal cutoff was that road that comes down from Mailbox Road. And so when we got there, I said, look, let's just stay here. And, even if we get a mile closer, it's not going to make that much difference in the film. And they said, no, let's go on. So we went another couple 100 feet, and we had the lights out. As we stopped, a couple sets of headlights came on in front of the vehicle, and we decided to run because I thought we were in illegal territory. As it turns out, we weren't, and we could have all avoided a lot of trouble. And Bob never would have lost his job, and I never would have lost mine if we'd have just, sat there and let him walk up to us. But the fact is, we thought we were in illegal territory, and we turned around and we started going 90 miles an hour down the road with them in hot pursuit. We almost made it to the highway, but they had sent another Bronco around and cut us off. And when we saw him coming down the road, we stopped. Bob ran out in the desert. I jumped out and started setting up the telescope, and that's when the first Bronco came to a halt. And I ran up and threw my hands against the top of the car, and I said, holy smokes, you guys aren't dopers, are you? You scared the hell out of us out here. And they get out, and they all were armed with machine guns, and they stand around. There was like 4 or 5 of them, and they stood at port arms around us. And the one guy said, what are you guys doing up here? And we said, we're just looking at the stars. He said, well, why did you run? And I said, like I said, we thought you were dopers. And he said, well, we're not. We need to see some identification, and we showed him some, we had to give him our social security and the driver's license, and he ran it, and all this process took about 30 minutes. And he said, we can't kick you off the range here because it's BLM land. He said, but we'll make it awful uncomfortable if you stay here. So they turned around and left. We stood behind the car waiting for about 15 minutes, and then Bob comes out of the desert. And we start talking about all the stuff that we'd done, the 3 weeks before, the 2 weeks before, all the stuff that we had done that night, all the preparation and everything, not realizing that all the time they had just gone about maybe 100 meters down the road and were filming us in infrared and listening to us with a parabolic microphone, all of which was made readily apparent to Bob the next day when he was taken up to security. So anyway, we packed up our stuff and went out on the road, and as we got to the highway, we were stopped by the Lincoln County Sheriff, Doug Lamoureux, who has since become a good friend. And he kept us there for an hour. He wanted to see in the trunk, but we wouldn't let him in there, mainly because that was where the gun was that Bob had taken out in the desert. But anyway, it seems that Lamoureux knew exactly what was going on. He wanted to know why there was 5 people in the vehicle now and only 4 on the test site, and he wanted to know where the gun was. So obviously there was communication between the security forces on the test site and the sheriff. Anyway, we stood there for an hour. Nobody said anything. And finally, to bring this all to a halt, Bob decided to confess that it was his gun, and it was in the trunk. And I saw him walking to go ahead and do it. And at that split second, Doug said, "Okay, look, here's what we're going to do. I've been advised to release you guys, but we don't want to ever see you here again, ever." And he let us go. And it was a real quiet ride home that night. And the next day, Bob's boss, Dennis Mariana, called him up and said, "Bob, I'm going to pick you up. Don't go to the airplane. Don't go to the EGMG." He picked him up. He drove him up to Indian Springs, which is this site of the entire security for the test site. And they actually pulled him out of the car with a gun in his head and a gun in his ear, and said, "Bob, when we gave you the security clearance and told you this was a secret, it didn't mean you could tell all your friends about the flying saucers."
The first things they said was, when we trusted you with this information, we didn't mean, intend for you to tell everyone you know about it. They Gardelled an M16 directly in my face and, wanted to impress upon me how serious they were about it.
Really, man, hats off to Bob Lazar. I mean, I don't know if you are super familiar with the things that he went through after releasing this information initially. I mean, now he has a Netflix documentary and he's really well known, and people don't really pay attention anymore, I feel like, because the story's so old. But he's one of the only people in the mainstream whistleblower UFO community whose story hasn't changed in 30 years. It's the same. He doesn't pretend to know everything like a lot of these people with these UFO experiences do, just releasing books and kind of adding more stuff to their story over time to keep it interesting, or saying they were just lost memories. His story's been the same over the years, and then you have friends of his that are telling the same story he is, so just gives a lot of credibility to it. And man, I mean, he was drugged through hell. Good on him, man. We need more people like him.
2 moons mean twice the power, twice the influence, and potentially twice the chaos. This comes with many implications. Think about it. Lunar energy already plays a huge role in shaping our emotions, our behaviors, and even natural events like tides. Now, with the appearance of a second moon, we're stepping into uncharted territory. The energy from this event is expected to heighten emotional intensity, causing everything from sudden mood swings to erratic behaviors. This isn't just an internal shift. The world around us will feel it too. Technology could malfunction, communication may become more erratic, and even weather patterns might become unpredictable. But what's even more important is the spiritual significance. In many cultures, the moon represents balance and harmony. With 2 moons, that balance could be disrupted, forcing us to confront deeper, unresolved aspects of ourselves. Are you prepared for the emotional, spiritual, and even physical turbulence that's coming? Because each of us to the edge.
So here's something really interesting. I'm not really into the spiritual, go to the beach, get in a drum circle, dance in the moon kind of energy enthusiast culture that's really big here in Florida. It's cool for people, but it's just not really been my thing. But I have to say, and I've talked to many people, and I've felt it myself, this past month, things feel weird, man. I feel like my mood has been all over the place, up and down. People have been acting strange. Life has been weird and difficult, and I know that the world is in a difficult place right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of it is not great for a lot of people, but it does just feel weird, man. And if you are familiar with the hollow moon theory, and basically it's a created object, right, and not a natural object like other moons. And basically it came here to balance the Earth's gravity and rotation and the tides and whatnot to make the Earth function the way it does now. I could see another moon being within like that space and it kind of throwing things off and making things feel weird. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of information on it. I just know that things have felt weird for me lately. A lot of people I know feel the same way. So let me know if you feel it too. Like I said, this isn't something I'm like, the moon is in Gatorade right now, so, or Venus is in Costco or whatever people say to basically like not take accountability for them being assholes. But it does feel weird. It feels strange. Things feel off. So let me know in the comments if you feel it too.
This is why the colors are in black and white. And let me show you why. So, as somebody just said, all of those are slaves. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is these people are born into this. They are from incubators. They're probably clones. You know, there's lots of orphans and infants. You know, it's really weird when you start to think about it. Like, think about all these buildings being there, but then all the people who are there are usually orphans or infants, and there's some sort of reproduction happening, because where did all the children come from? And we'll talk about that next. But there's an interesting part in here, and it talks about, you know, a lot of people say this is all paper mache. You know, they didn't use any real copper. They didn't use any real materials. It was all fake. That's the story. But it caught on fire, and it looks like stone to me. But this is why the colors are in black and white. And let me show you why. It says, crowning the Central Agriculture Dome was the only statue at the fair by Augustus St. Gaudens, who originally intended to make a statue named Diana, which was 18.5 feet of pure copper. This was a huge weather vane for the Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden, doesn't that sound familiar? We know that one. New York City, I think that's where it is, or wherever it is. It's in New York or New Jersey, whatever it is. But it's a common name that we still hear to this day. And here, and we see more angels on a ship. If you guys see all that. So this was all built, you know, just overnight, kind of. That's what they kind of told us. They prepared the people. And this statue is made out of gold. The statue was moved. It's still partially located in Chicago, but they did move it. But look at those arches. This is remarkable. I mean, we can barely build a square box nowadays, and this is what they were building in 1893. You know, I mean, just look at the detail. I mean, look at that. And then you also have angels on top. And then you got horses on top as well, too. It's plaster, they tell us. That's what people are commenting below. This was all plaster. You know, plaster, that's what they're saying. And look at all these lights. This doesn't look very eco-friendly, or I may be against climate change, as we were told. Remember the whole climate change thing? Looks very, it would affect the climate, as we were being told. But look at this. I mean, these are all the lights that are lit up at nighttime. And those are on gas and dynamos and everything related to this.
So for me personally, the thing that bothers me the most and makes me the most upset, if all that stuff was real, like brick, mortar, copper, steel, however they made it, if they ripped it down for whatever reason to hide the ancient civilization or the older, more advanced civilization, that is the most upsetting thing to me. I mean, people travel to Greece and people travel to Italy and all over the world to see these types of buildings and monuments and structures and just this beautiful architecture. If we had that here in the United States, I know there's still some, but if we had like that, a lot of it, like if that was like our main architecture and they tore it down for whatever reason, that is so upsetting to me. But also the Chicago World Fair that this, you know, Tartaria book or whatever is talking about, this guy has, they actually had a moving walkway, which was insane. It was like in the airport, the moving walkway is like the horizontal escalator basically that speeds up your walk from terminal to terminal. Like they had that there. There was like video of it and it's crazy. I mean, the fact that they had, you know, in the late 1800s when it's supposed to be like horse and buggies and Little House on the Prairie type stuff, that they had all these things. If they were able to make this kind of architecture with quote unquote paper mache, why don't they still make it like that? Why don't they make it like legit though? Because that was literally beautiful. That like bridge and those arches, like it looked like ancient Rome or Greece, but like here in Chicago. I want to see that shit, dude.
Apollo 11. There is Stanley Kubrick and there is the Apollo 11 logo on the camera. Here is Stanley Kubrick examining the first footprint of the man walking on the moon, Neil Armstrong. There is Stanley Kubrick and a set with an astronaut on wires. Here is Stanley Kubrick from the front. There is another view of the set with a lunar model and operators in front of, a huge moon model and an operator with camera, artists who are painting the moonscape on huge canvas, another view of the moon simulator and an operator in front of, rails for a moving camera filming the models to simulate approaching the moon surface, while the models were on the left and on the right side of the rails and the canvas was on the top. Here the camera is filming the top, so the canvas on rails. Artists are painting the canvas and there is the canvas hanging from the top side. So the moving camera on rails below this canvas can film this, and this is what it looks like. Here is the moving camera on rails filming the canvas.
I'm just going to say it. I believe it. I believe it's real. I believe that we walked on the moon on Stanley Kubrick's movie set. 100%. Like, so some of this footage, I could see it nowadays being AI to kind of create like this, trick us into thinking that, you know, Stanley Kubrick actually did that. I don't know if any of that footage is real. It's so hard to tell nowadays with AI being so advanced, but I've thought that for a long time. I think there's a good chance that footage is real. I mean, Stanley Kubrick, if you look at video breakdowns of like people talking about him hinting in The Shining, like with the kid wearing like an Apollo 11 sweater and just all the hints throughout The Shining of him trying to basically tell us that he filmed the moon landing, whether he was doing that just to stir up controversy or messing with us or actually like leaking, you know, the information that he worked on the Apollo 11 mission. Who knows? But I personally think that we probably sent something to the moon, maybe not people, maybe just like a ship or something or a robot or something, and we found something up there that we could not share. And if we did go to the moon, I think we found something that we're not allowed to talk about, or someone that told us not to tell the rest of us about it. So they had to record something to show us something different than what's actually there.
Do you believe that various presidents have been informed about what you believe to be the truth on UFOs?
The people that control this information is a organization that we know of as MJ-12, and they're a top group of military and scientists. And I do know that when the president becomes president, it takes at least 3 or 4 months before he actually gets the clearance to know everything there is. Now, that doesn't mean they tell him, but it does take 3 or 4 months to get. The quote from Carter when he was during his election campaign: "If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists. I am convinced that UFOs exist because I have seen one."
Jimmy Carter says he saw one.
That's Jimmy Carter. He saw one in
But
1973.
he didn't tell us, did he?
He doesn't. The pressure is enormous on these people to cover this stuff up. The Air Force has made an art form of ridiculing people who have talked about this thing. They've done an excellent job of covering it up for the last 40 years. George, basically what we're dealing with here is, I'll give you the bottom line.
Okay.
I'm not trying to sell it.
I want to hear your thesis.
I'm
your
not trying to
central
sell a
point.
book. I'm not trying to promote a lecture. This is based on what I've come across after intense research in the last year. And I have found out that the government has retrieved between 10 and 15 actual flying saucers, 3 of which have been in perfect condition, 1 of which they tried to fly. Up at the test site, there's a report that of the 3 that they got in perfectly good condition, at least 1 is up at the test site and has flown, and 1 was being flown as of 1981.
By us.
By us, yeah.
There's not a doubt in my mind that we recovered spaceships. I don't know if they're from space or from Hollow Earth or from the bottom of the ocean, if they're time travelers, if they're interdimensional beings, if they're extraterrestrials from outer space. Who knows? I don't know. But I 100% think that we have encountered these ships and these beings, right? These humanoid beings and all these things that these whistleblowers talk about. There's not a doubt in my mind, man. Our jump in technology since the mid 1900s of when they supposedly like recovered all these ships and stuff, and they claim they didn't, has been like insane. And I know technology just exponentially increases like that. That's what happens, especially now with like AI and things like that. And we've had AI for a while, much longer than they've told us. I mean, I feel like we would have to have something to refer to, right? Something to kind of reverse engineer, something to teach us, or someone to teach us in order to have the exponential growth that we've had within just like technology and in our civilization. I don't know. You have to let me know what you think, but I am 100% on board with all these whistleblowers for the most part.
Jesus wasn't a Christian, okay? Jesus was not a Christian. Christianity didn't exist until Jesus was long gone and dead. But the practice of understanding a Christ consciousness existed. And understanding what it meant to ascend to a higher level of consciousness, they called it Christ consciousness. It's an ancient text in deep antiquity. It has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. Jesus, or really his name is Yeshua, is just one of many teachers of Christ's knowledge and wisdom. Okay? Yeshua was never sacrificed. In the Sinai Bible, which predates the King James Bible by almost 1,000 years, Yeshua was never sacrificed. Not only that, there's close to 10,000 mistranslations between the two Bibles. The King James Bible is heavily curated information. You want to get closer to the source, you got to get to the Ethiopian Bible, which includes the book of Enoch. That's the only Bible in the world that includes the full book of Enoch is in the Ethiopian Bible. And this book has been so altered and so played with that the information is skewed and set up in a way with pure neuroscience. And when I mean these people that put this together, these people had to be neuroscientists. This is why I'm telling you in my previous video from last week, could the God of the Bible really be Satan? Well, the answer is yes. And the answer is, this is the person, and him and his nephew, Amun-Ra, curated this thing from the very beginning, how they wanted it to play out. So they can make you think that they were going to their demise. Meanwhile, they were leading you to your own demise, taking you completely off course and off track as to what the real meaning of the text actually is, by mixing a lot of truth with a little bit of lies, sprinkling it right in there with some fabrication. Hell was added to the Bible by the Roman Catholic Church. Lake of Fire was added to the Bible in the 1600s, Roman Catholic Church. The rapture was added to the Bible in 1835 by William James Darby, okay? Added to the Bible. Then later it was a cliff note originally, a suggestion that he came up with on his own. But when some pastors saw how much power it had over the people, it later made it into the canonized text. And now you got people running around talking about the Lord is coming to rapture me and take me back on this cloud and all this crazy stuff. That's just fabricated information that you didn't know about. Doesn't exist.
Woo! I mean, if you think about it, fear is the best way to control people. I'm just saying.
Discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, the Gospel of Thomas is a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus. Unlike the canonical Gospels, it lacks narrative and focuses on secret teachings intended for those seeking deeper understanding, a hallmark of mystery school doctrine. Throughout the Gospel, Jesus speaks of the kingdom of God not as a distant realm, but as an inner reality.
If those who lead you say to you, "See, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, "It is in the sea," then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father.
This closely mirrors the teachings of the Egyptian mystery schools, which taught that divinity resides within each individual, a concept derived from the teachings about human potential and the divine spark implanted within humanity.
There is light within a person of light, and it shines on the whole world.
Acknowledging an inner luminosity or knowledge, reminiscent of the enlightenment achieved through initiation into the mystery schools.
Whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death.
This suggests that immortality, or perhaps some form of ascension, is attainable through understanding this hidden wisdom.
Shoo, boy, I gotta give me some of that wisdom, baby. Trying to live forever.
In 1933, the government got themselves into trouble and they owed a lot of gold. And so what'd they do? Article 6102, they declared a bank holiday. All the banks shut down for a week. No one could get their money out of the bank. When the banks opened back up, gold's illegal. You're not allowed to own it, and you can't get your gold out of the bank. Don't worry though. We're going to give you your $20 per ounce. Here you go. These debt instruments. We're going to give them to you, but they're not redeemable for gold anymore. And by the way, it's not $20 per ounce anymore. Now it's $35 per ounce. So you just lost 60% of your wealth instantly.
Oh my God.
So we know that we can't trust them because they fail over and over and over. Then now gold is $35 per ounce. So that continued on to the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. By we get to the 50s and the 60s, all these nations around the world are like, wait a minute, what is going on? You're printing way too many dollars. We don't want these paper certificates. We want the gold. So they start collecting their gold from the US. France sends their warships over to the US to collect the gold. And President Richard Nixon in 1971 said, nope, we default on our obligations. We will not pay out the gold. The gold window is closed and the dollar is no longer pegged to gold. Now this was a really big deal because in 1944, under what's called the Bretton Woods Agreement, the entire world agreed collectively that the dollar would be pegged to gold and all the currencies would be pegged to the dollar. But the US lied the whole time. They printed too many dollars. And when that severed, not did just dollar get disconnected from gold, all currencies did. So we're 52 years or now 53 years into this fiat money experiment that the world has never seen before.
And we're walking around the studio, and he said to me, do you know that if you sold your soul to the devil, you can have instant fame tomorrow? And when he said that, it was like all the rumors about conspiracy theories and, you know, oh, people worship the devil, like all of that, which I thought was fake, became very real because now it's coming from the horse's mouth. It became so real that I'm like, oh no. And it was as if a presence entered the room because my entire body went limp. I fell to the ground and I started crying, like, God, forgive me, Lord, have mercy on me, forgive me, and crying on the ground in front of this guy. I was broken from that weight in that moment. So I'm praying and I'm crying out, asking God to forgive me. And then I stopped because I'm embarrassed now. And I look up and he sat down and he had his head bowed and his arms on his knees and he was just quiet. We never spoke of that night ever again.
So here's the thing. I'm not saying the devil don't exist. I'm not saying God don't exist. I'm not saying gods don't exist. I'm not saying anything like that. But I think a lot of the times when they talk about selling your soul in Hollywood, they talk about basically just giving up your life for fame. I think maybe they constitute the basically giving yourself away, giving into inhibitions, giving up your morals, just completely getting rid of your integrity, right? Just to basically just be someone you're not entirely. Just act completely against your good judgment in order to reach the success that you need to reach, right? Whether that be just like the crazy shit is what works and gets attention, or having to, you know, be blackmailed in order to have a producer push your music, or, you know, some sort of nefariousness. You know, I'm not sure what level that is, but that's kind of what I think of initially. You know, I'm not saying that people aren't actually like selling their soul to some evil entity, right, that's like projecting them into fame and fortune. I'm just saying in most cases, I associate it with just completely just giving yourself away and letting people control your life, essentially, for the rest of your years.
Scientists might have just created consciousness by growing brains in a jar and connecting them to a computer made from stem cells that were stimulated in a special way to form neural tissue, which grew and eventually formed structures and even brainwave activity similar to that of a premature human baby. They then hooked up this brain into a computer, connecting it into a virtual world where it learned to play Pong completely from scratch. I want you to realize what this means. Like, this isn't a computer bot that was pre-programmed to know exactly how to play the game. That's easy. It's an organic brain that they grew themselves that was given Pong with no instructions, and it just taught itself how to play, which is honestly nothing new. That's just AI, but this is organic AI, which happens to learn quicker and is also more energy efficient than traditional AI. It learned to play Pong in about 10 to 15 rallies, when a regular computer AI would take around 5,000. Albeit the computer AI can simulate those 5,000 rallies much quicker, but that takes a lot more computing power, which is sort of our main bottleneck with AI at the moment. Energy. This is organoid intelligence. Take human brain cells, grow them in a petri dish, and then use computers to train them just like AI. Naturally, there are ethical concerns rising, as there is surmounting evidence showing us that these are conscious, like a human. Even the scientists working on it themselves admit these organoids are sentient. They took it a step further and tested out these organoid brains inside real physical robots, feeding them the sensory input of everything the robot experiences. And since the computer chip running it is organic brain matter, computer, this technically, by definition, is a cyborg. Then there are companies like Final Spark that let you rent server space on these organoid brains, which essentially act like organic CPUs. You can even see live streams of the brain computers you're renting out. And now this next part right here, what they're doing here might actually prove simulation theory. So they have this virtual butterfly simulation that's controlled by the organoid brains, meaning the brains feel and experience everything the butterflies do. Again, the brains weren't trained or programmed how to be a butterfly. Just like they did with Pong, they were just fed the sensory feelings of being butterflies and kind of figured out themselves how to flap their wings and just exist. Much the same way you weren't pre-programmed to walk or talk. You experienced sensory inputs in the forms of sight, sounds, touch, and learned, taught yourself along the way. This is an organic brain being fed computer data to make it believe it actually exists in a simulated world, and it's also likely sentient. This company essentially just created the Matrix for butterflies, and its consciousness is available for you to rent out. And when no one's using it, it still just continues to exist with no human interaction whatsoever. If the brains really are conscious, as the scientists suggest, they're not gonna know they're this organoid computer brain in a lab hooked up to a virtual simulation. They're gonna believe that they really are that butterfly. If that's the case, what's stopping all of us from being our own organoid brains in some lab in a different dimension? Meaning this, everything we see and experience right now is our own simulation that we've been plugged into, except we're not butterflies, we're humans. And everything we do, every decision we make is not by our own free will, but by some, I don't know, fifth dimensional entity renting server space in our brains. Just the same way this Final Spark neural platform lets us do. And when we sleep, maybe our idle brain computational power is used for other purposes, which we experience as dreams. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. You gotta sleep tonight. Are we really brain organoids, existing in our own petri dishes, connected to and experiencing a fully virtual simulated world? Because we just pulled it off. And according to simulation theory, if we're capable of creating virtual simulated realities, then chances are we're already living in one.
All right, well, that's terrifying. Cool. Cool.
So he gives me the first target, and it was a pyramid, really huge pyramid. In comparison to the big pyramid in Egypt, you could put 3 of them inside this puppy, and it's got big rooms in it, which construction-wise, they must know something we don't know, because a pyramidal shape is very difficult to build inside.
Monitor. All right now, using the information in the envelope I've provided, exclusively focusing your attention now, focus on 40.89 degrees north, 9.55 degrees west.
And the first set of coordinates was 44.89 degrees, 9.55 degrees west.
Subject. I want to say it looks like, I don't know. It sort of looks, I kind of got an oblique view of a pyramid form. It's very high. It's kind of sitting in a large depressed area.
The second pyramid war, bad. That one almost decimated the planet. If you go to Egypt and stick your hand deep in the sands, eventually you're going to come up with balls of glass. How can you get glass and sand? 3,000 plus degree temperatures. You see how when you look at Earth, like from Google Earth, you see a lot of those big deserts going across? People say, oh, that's just natural geological formations over time. This has become an arid desert. No, that's war. You go to Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, what are you going to see there? Dead bodies still in the streets from thousands of years ago, still holding hands, never been scavenged. The buildings that they lived in turned to glass. How can that be? We're talking about 3,000 plus degree temperature weapons fire. We're talking about this war that happened in the ancient past. Amun-Ra wanted to continue he started the first war to take over the earth early because he didn't want to wait for his processional period to rule. And then this is the guy who says you must say amen after everything. You say amen. Everything you give thanks for, you're saying amen to him. So when you say amen, you're thanking him, by the way. A brutal killing guy. But anyway, so he says, it's a fact. He started one war to take over early, which he won. He then started a second war to stay in power. And in that second war, he escaped. He was almost killed. But he left his kingship and the finances of the kingdom to the Ra Kham. and R-A-K-A-M, but that translates into modern words. Calm translates into child's. So now you translate raw child.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
There's a location in the Western Sahara Desert of Mauritania called the Rishat structure. It's also commonly referred to as the Eye of the Sahara. What's so spectacular about this is that it just so happens to match more than a dozen striking similarities to what Plato had described as the lost ancient capital city of Atlantis, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 3 of water, 2 of land, which matches the Rishat structure. It also is said to have an opening to the sea at the south. You can clearly see that water had ran through it.
And north of the Rishat structure are the Atlas Mountains. Atlas being the king of Atlantis. The video cut out before I got to that part, but I'm pretty familiar. I've been obsessed with Atlantis since I was like 12 years old. It's my favorite. Atlantis is my favorite conspiracy and outer space in general. Yeah, my brain can't take any more today, guys. Holy shit. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one.